Namaste and good morning, everyone. Let's start our class with some prayers. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo, Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhu Bhuvaswaha, Tatsavitra Varenayam, Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Diyo Yo Nah Prachodayat, Asto Ma Sadgamya, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya, Mrityorma Amritam Gamya. ओम सहना भवतु सहनो भुनक्तु सवीर्यं कर्वावै तेजस्वी नावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावै ओम शांति शांति शांति. Let's open our Mahabharata book on page number 585. And the title of this chapter is The Dying Patriarch. We know that Bheeshma Pitama is on the bed of the arrows. And now Yudhishthir, Shri Krishna, and the other Pandavas also, they are there to get some advice from him. So the next morning with the sun, Yudhishthir comes to Krishna's apartment. He finds his cousin pensive. The Pandav says, "Did you have a restful night, my lord? But you seem disturbed. Krishna, are you unwell?" Krishna smiles at him and shakes his head. He makes no reply immediately. Then slowly he says, "I was thinking of your Pitama Bheeshma. He will not live much longer, Yudhishthir, and I hear him calling me. When Bheeshma dies, all his wisdom will vanish with him. We must go to him before that happens. You must learn whatever he has to teach you about your dharma as a king. Bheeshma's wisdom is a priceless treasure. He must share it with you before he leaves us." Yudhishthir says, "Let us go at once, Krishna, together." Satyaki comes in just then. Krishna says to him, "Tell Daruk to prepare my chariot and you prepare to ride with us. We are going to Kurukshetra to see Bheeshma." They set out, Yudhishthir and his brothers, Satyaki and Krishna. Kurukshetra lies bare before them, now that its corpses have been removed and burned. It is difficult to believe just days ago the greatest of all wars was fought here. At the edge of the fateful field, like another sun setting over the earth, Bheeshma lies dying. Krishna and the Pandavas alight from their chariots and make their way to the patriarch on his bed of arrows. Many mysterious munis, whom none of them has ever seen before, sit around Bheeshma, some silently in dhyana, others softly chanting arcane mantras that have all but passed out of the world. Krishna approaches the Kuru grandsire first and, kneeling beside him, takes his hand. Bheeshma's eyes flicker open. They are like and full of pain. He sees Krishna at his side, and Bheeshma's eyes flare with light. His face is lit by a smile. Krishna says, also smiling, "Oh, my lord, how do you bear such pain? Why, if a needle pricks me, I cannot stand it. Here you are with 100 arrows lodged in your body, and you have been lying on them for so long. There is no one like you in all the world, no one with such a mighty will, Devrat. Not just a will, Bheeshma, but wisdom also. Brihaspati, Shukra, Vashishta, and Markandeya were your gurus, and you have always walked the way of dharma. Never in time has a greater man lived on this earth, and none ever shall. Your grandson Yudhishthir has been crowned king in Hastinapur. He has come to see you with his brothers. Now more than ever, Yudhishthir has need of your wisdom. He is shaken by all the killing and dying he saw on Kurukshetra. He is full of sorrow and needs you to comfort him. It is just 56 days until Uttarayan. When you die, all your wisdom will disappear from the world forever, unless you leave something of what you know with Yudhishthir. Your grandsons have come to you. Tell them what you know about dharma, artha, and yoga." Again, the smile touches Bhisham's face. With an effort, he begins to speak. You are the Paramatma who pervades this universe. You tell me what I should do. I do not know how much longer I will live. This pain has robbed me of the count of time. I have discharged my debt to Satyavati. I can die in peace now. I am only waiting for Surya's chariot to change its course in the sky. He pauses. Then another light is in his eyes. He takes Krishna's hand and says, My Lord, I want to see your Vishwarup before I die. Won't you show yourself to me? At the end of 56 days, when you leave your body, I will be at your side. But first, you have one final task left. You must pass your wisdom on to Yudhishthira. Bhisham laughs. Krishna, you mock me. How can I speak of Dharma, Arth, and Yoga when you are here with us? You who are the beginning and the end of all knowledge. Dare a Shishya hold forth in his Guru's presence? And then these arrows fill me with agony. I can hardly speak. You are too modest, Bhisham, says Krishna. You must teach Yudhishthira everything you know. But I am so weak, I can hardly bear the pain I am in. To speak at any length would be impossible. Besides, my memory has faded, and you want me to remember what I learned when I was a boy? Forgive me, Krishna, but I don't have the strength for this final task. The avatar's body shines. He speaks as softly as before, but there is unearthly authority in his voice. Krishna says, I grant you a boon. From this moment until you die, you will feel no pain. Your memory will be as clear as the heart of a rishi. Your mind will be sharp as a sword. Bhishma, to sever any knot that binds Yudhishthira's heart. It is told the sky showered down a petal rain on Krishna and Bhishma. A wave of relief floods Bhishma as all his pain vanishes. Krishna squeezes the Kuru ancient's hand, and then he rises, saying, We will leave you to collect your thoughts, but we will return early tomorrow to hear your wisdom. That night is the first restful one Krishna has spent in a long time. He sleeps deeply, a dreamless slumber. Early next morning, he sends Satyaki to Yudhishthira. Soon they are ready to set out again for Kurukshetra. An hour after dawn, the Pandav and Krishna arrive on the field. Bhisham lies on it like the rising sun. He has not felt a twinge of pain since Krishna blessed him, and he too has spent a restful night. Bhisham feels detached from his body, free to range through the labyrinths of his days. The past is clear before him in all its fabulous richness. The book of his life is his to read from at will. Indeed, most of the night Bhisham has leafed through that marvelous time as he pleased. There is so much he sees plainly now, which was obscured before. Devrat sees his life for the miracle it has been, every symphonious moment. Bhisham welcomes Krishna in a stronger voice. Yudhishthira and his brothers still linger in the background. Narad, who is at Bhisham's side, says, Let Yudhishthira ask whatever he has to quickly. Time flits by and Bhisham will not live long. Before Krishna can call Yudhishthira closer, Bhisham says, Krishna, I am free of pain and my mind is keen and clear. I think I can answer any questions Yudhishthira has for me. But there is something I want to know. You can teach the dharma better than I can. Why have you chosen to entrust this task to me? Gently, Krishna says, Perhaps you are right, Bhishma, and I can tell Yudhishthira what he needs to know. But I thought let Bhisham's name be a legend forever in the world. Let men hear his wisdom and count it as being equal to the Vedas. What you say to your grandson shall be immortal, and men will live their lives by it. A man is said to live in the world for as long as his fame does. You are the greatest man ever to grace the earth, and I want your spirit to be with humankind forever. So I ask you to teach the dharma to Yudhishthira and his brothers. Tears start down Bhisham's face as he listens to the avatar. and feels his love upon him. Bhisham is speechless for that stupendous love. At last, slowly, the Kuru patriarch says, let Yudhishthir ask me whatever he wants. I will be happy to tell him anything I know. Yudhishthir is afraid to approach you. He thinks you might blame him for what happened during the war. Bhisham raises his voice and calls Yudhishthir. When the Pandav comes hesitantly and kneels at his side, Bhisham lays both his hands on his head, blessing him. Laughing, the patriarch says, why should you be afraid to come to your Pitama? I know your noble heart. I blame you for nothing, my child. Every Kshatriya's dharma is to fight and kill his enemies, whoever they may be. You have only followed your dharma. Why should you feel guilty? Call your brothers also and ask me whatever you want. I learned what I know from unworldly masters long ago, and I will tell you everything I learned by the grace of this immortal one who has come among us and is pleased to call himself Krishna. Next chapter, Bhisham's wisdom. The Kuru sovereign Yudhishthir asks his grandsire Bhisham, lying on his bed of arrows, I have heard that a king's is the highest dharma, Pitama. I would learn my dharma from you. Bhisham says, a king's first dharma is to worship the gods and to honor Brahmins who are illumined men. But he himself should always be a Karam Yogi, a man of deeds. There are those that say destiny is all important in a king's life. Karam comes first, Yudhishthir. Destiny is important, but his own actions shape a king's destiny. Indeed, I would even say a king's deeds are more powerful than destiny. The king's second dharma is to be truthful. If you are a man of truth, your subjects will honor you, trust you. A king must be above reproach. He must be restrained, humble, and righteous. He must be a master of his passions. Justice must be like breathing to him. It must come naturally. As for his weaknesses, he must know how to conceal them, to be perfectly secretive about them. He must know his enemies' weaknesses and hardly let them know he does. A king's plans must be opaque, known only to himself and perhaps one or two counselors whom he trusts. In the footnote, it says the patriarch's discourse on the dharma of Kshatriyas and kings teams, among other things, with creation legends, tales of the Devas and Asurs, the Rishis, the parables and other stories, descriptions of many royal houses and bloodlines, the nature and art of kingship, legends of great kings of the past, the yugas and ages gone by, the avatars of God, and expositions on the nature of time and God. In Ganguly's translation, the discourse which runs through both Parvas is about 900 pages long. So that means this is just a very short summary of what went on between Yudhishthir and the dialogue between Yudhishthir and Bhisham Pitama. So he says a king's demeanor should be unafraid and straightforward. This is Bhisham Pitama saying. He must not be too mild. He will be disregarded if he is, and his subjects will have no respect for him. That does not mean he should be harsh or tyrannical, and that his people should be unduly frightened of him. Most of all, a king must know how to choose those who serve him. He should be a judge of men and know whom he can trust and who are dangerous. Compassion must be part of the good king, but never weakness. If he is weak, the lowest men will take advantage of him. Vigilance is integral to a king's every moment. He must always be alert and study both his friends and his enemies. Above all, he must remember his first duty is towards his subjects. He must nurture them as a mother does the child in her womb. His dharma is never to please himself at his people's expense. As a mother is with her child, a king should be with his people. Their welfare should be his only concern. A king must be the loneliest man in the land. He must not share his inmost thoughts with anyone, not even his closest advisors. He must be adept at dealing with the stronger enemy, the equal and the weaker one. He must know how to employ spies and sow dissension in his enemy's city to divide those that serve his enemy. He should know how to bribe his enemy's soldiers and officials, make them betray their master. A king should speak pleasantly at all times. He should surround himself with those that are as noble as he is, whose natures and thoughts concur with his own. Indeed, the only difference between himself and those that serve him should be the crown on his head. The noblest king is the one in whose country the subjects are like children in their father's house. They are contented because it is their own home they are living in. There is no deceit or pretense among them, no envy or dishonesty. The essence of a king's dharam is to secure his subjects' prosperity, their happiness. There is no harder task on earth, and he must use varied methods to achieve his ends. Most important are the men he appoints to positions of power. They must be honest and sincere men, yet he should never trust them entirely. The treasury must always be full, for the king's power stems from his wealth as well. He must always have a powerful army to protect his kingdom, for that too is the secret of his strength. He must be a master of creating discord in his enemies' kingdoms, because therein also lies his strength. He should be wary and always on his guard against his enemy, who would do the same to him, create dissension within his country, his very court. The king is the justice in the land. He is the one who metes out punishment to wrongdoers and protects the righteous. He should be honest, but he must know the ways of the world, how to fight fire with fire. He can never afford to be a simpleton. And yet the world must never see him as being other than candid and straightforward. Thus Bheeshma of the Kurus discourses on the dharma of a king to Yudhishthira. He dwells on the many nuances and secrets of kingdom. And they soon find the day has flown by and the sun is sinking in the west. Yudhishthira takes his Pitama's hand and says, "You must rest now. I will return first thing in the morning. There is so much I have to ask you still." Bhisham lays his palm on Yudhishthira's head. He shuts his eyes and peace steals over him. He falls into a deep, healing sleep. The next morning, Yudhishthira and his brothers arrive with the sun. Yudhishthira has a question for his grandsire. "Pitama, how does a king come to be called Raja?" "He is just a man like all other men. He is subject to joy and grief. His mind and his senses are like those of other men. His lives for as long as other men do. He lives for as long as other men do. Among his subjects are men that are his superiors in intellect, in wisdom and courage. Yet the king rules all the others. Why is one man elevated to being a Raja Pita?" Bhisham says, long ago, in the first ages of Krit and Treta, there were no kings or kingdoms. The world was one, and all men lived as one in love, sharing the plenitude of the earth. The pristine spaces of nature were man's inheritance, and he was fulfilled in them. He rejoiced in them. All men were like brothers. They cared for one another as parts of themselves. As time advanced, evil crept into the hearts of men. Covetousness was the first darkness to cloud the light of men's mind. They became greedy and wanted possessions. Ancient man was free of such possessiveness. He knew his natural place in the order of things and exulted in time and its subtle fruit of wisdom and delight. The first step towards darkness was covetousness, but lust was not far behind. Lust never hunts alone. Wrath arrived with it. The age grew dark, and anarchy and confusion swept the world. The original Veda vanished from the lips and the minds of men. Dharam vanished with the Veda. The guardians of the world, the Devas, took panic and came trembling before their sire Brahma in his Sabha. Indra cried, Lord, the world you created is plunging towards destruction. You must save it. It was then that the Brahma composed the Niti Shastra, an interminable treaty on conduct. It contained 100,000 edicts. So far, men had been pure and had needed no more than their untainted natures to be their guru. Now they were corrupted. Their hearts had grown dark. They had need of the law outside themselves. When there's a law, someone must enforce the law. For the first time, men were divided into rulers and the ruled. The Niti Shastra dealt with the four concerns of human life: dharma, artha, kam, and moksha. Brahma dwelt on these at length. An important part of the Niti Shastra dealt with crime and its punishment. What constituted a crime and how each crime should be punished. There were two kinds of punishment the Shastra dealt with: the open and the secret punishment. It dealt for the first time with the traders and trade and the conservation of wealth. It dealt with the rishis and tapasya. It spoke of thieves and other criminals and how they should be treated. Another section of the Niti Shastra dwelt on religious observances and rituals and the conduct of the various officials in the kingdom, of counselors, spies, ambassadors, and the method of conciliation. Brahma composed that Shastra in a mere moment, and he said, let this be called the Dandaniti, the way of chastisement. There has never been crime or punishment before in the world. Now there is already crime, and let there be punishment as well. The treaty was studied and abridged by the great gods. Shiva being the first, just before it was given to men, the wise Shukra saw it. He knew men's lives were short, and most of them would hardly have the time to study such a voluminous Shastra. Shukra pared the original Dandaniti down to its present form of 1,000 essential edicts. Then the Devas brought the tract to the Lord Vishnu, who lies upon eternity's ocean of bliss. They said to him, Lord, show us a man on earth worthy of ruling all other men. Vishnu said to them, I will enter the body of one man. He and his sons shall be lords of the earth. A man called Vain was chosen to be king. From Vain's right arm, a son was born, and he was as glorious as Indra. He was born wearing a coat of mail and with all the occult and earthly weapons. He was born knowing the Vedas and the Shastras and the art of war and of kingship and all the other arts too. His name was Prithu, and the rishis made him king of the world. Men said in those days that Prithu was the 8th son of Vishnu himself. Prithu leveled the uneven earth. Vishnu and the Devas came down to witness the coronation of Prithu. Bhumi Devi came as a goddess bearing treasures of gold and jewels for King Prithu. Prithu asked her to be a cow, and he milked her for the 7 foods which all living creatures would eat. Prithu was the lord not only of men, but also of the forests and the trees and the birds and beasts in them. It was Prithu who first established Dharam in the world and elevated it above all else. Prithu brought peace and righteousness back to the earth. And because the people loved him, he was called Raja. He who pleased all men. Because he healed men's sick minds, he was also called Kshatriya. Because the earth was pervaded by virtue during his reign, she was named Prithvi after him. Vishnu is said to have entered that first king's body. And Prithu was blessed with divine intelligence, superior to any other man's. Thus, a king was created by the gods themselves and was not to be trifled with. That was why he ruled the world, but not the world him. And so Yudhishthir, a king, is called Raja. Yudhishthir asks, what is the dharma of the people? Their first task is to choose a king and crown him. For his treasury, they must give up a 15th part of their livestock and gold and a 10th part of their grain. They should help him choose from among them men that are proficient at arms, so the kingdom can have an army. It is said a fourth part of the people's punya, their virtue, accrues to their king, and so to a fourth of their pap, their sins. Before their king, the people should be as Shishya before his guru, humble. A king whom his own subjects honor will naturally be feared by his enemies. What are the king's other duties, Pitama? First of all, a king should subdue himself. Then it will be easy to subdue his enemies. There is no conquest as hard as that of his own five senses. Every king must wage a lifelong war against these. A king must have an army to defend his kingdom and his people. He must be vigilant because danger is always near. He must have spies who warn him of everything that goes on in his enemies' kingdoms. Why, in their very hearts? His spies must be the cleverest of his agents. They must seem like fools before whom an enemy will speak freely, without fear, or they must seem like men that are deaf and blind. In fact, they must be wise men, sharp and loyal, a king's eyes and ears in his streets and in distant parts. His spies must be the hardiest, most incorruptible men, strong and able to bear long privations, exile, cold, heat, violence, and hunger. A king must have secret agents in his own court that spy on his ministers, his friends, even on his sons. His spies should report only to the king himself. They must not know one another or they will become too powerful. The king on whom his people rely must never hesitate to be ruthless with his enemies. It must be beneath him to use treachery, fire, and poison against them. He should take a sixth of his people's income for himself as a tithe to maintain his army for their protection. His people are a king's children, but he must not be overly compassionate when punishing the criminals among them, or he will lose respect. Honest men who are perfectly trustworthy must be appointed to administer justice in the kingdom. If they are corrupt, the nation becomes weak. The old adage is so true, Yudhishthir, that the king makes the age and not the other way, that the age makes the king. Yet the four yugas have their different natures and gifts to bestow on the earth. The age when the kings of the world rule entirely by the Niti Shastra is called the Satya or the Krit Yuga. Dharma prevails perfectly in this yuga, and evil is unknown. It is an age where there is hardly any need for a king. The earth yields food without being tilled or sown, and life-giving herbs and sacred plants, which cure every disease, grow abundantly. Sickness hardly exists during the Helican Krit, and men live long lives. Every season is full of delight, and peace and harmony suffuse the earth, and its rulers reign immaculately by the Danda Niti. Then comes an age when the king rules with three parts of dharma and one of darkness. This is the Treta Yuga. The earth no longer yields food on her own, but waits to be tilled. The third yuga is the Dwapar, and its sovereigns employ a half part of dharma to rule, and the other half adharma, evil. The earth gives only half of what she can, and the foods she yields are only half as nourishing as they once were. The herbs of healing also have lost their power by half, and men too have lost half their dignity, strength, and splendor. In the last age, the Kali Yuga, the kings of the earth oppress their own people. Adharam is the rule of the day, and hardly a fourth of the Dandniti is used. The earth is governed by anarchy and violence. All kinds of diseases sweep the world, and men live short, harsh lives. The men of this yuga are diminished in every respect. Indeed, they are hardly men in the sense that men of old were. They are creatures of darkness, their hearts ruined by greed, lust, malice, and envy. The clouds do not bring the rain in season, drought and famine have their way with the world. These are the yugs, Yudhishthir, and the king is said to cause them. Pitama, the king is the lord of wealth. Whose wealth does he own? The Vedas say that the wealth of all men, except Brahmins, belongs to the king. It is the king's dharma to support the holy ones who bless the kingdom. The Pandava asked, no king can accomplish even the smallest task by himself, but he needs his ministers. What are the traits and the dharma of the king's ministers? What kind of men are worthy of being ministers? Bheeshma says, a king is usually surrounded by four kinds of men. The first kind is the one whose opinion is always the same as his own. Dharma or not. The second kind is the man who is sincerely devoted to his sovereign. The third is related by blood, and the fourth may be those who began as enemies but have been won over with gifts. There is also a fifth man who serves only dharma. The fifth kind is rigid, and a king should exercise caution while confiding in him. A king has to rule not only with dharma, but with adharma too. And the fifth kind of friend or minister will censure him whenever he uses the dark ways. He might even betray him. Most important is choosing the ministers with whom a king will surround himself. When power and position are involved, no man can be trusted entirely. A dishonest man can appear honest, and an honest man a villain. Power also changes men. A man who was scrupulously honest can be corrupted by power and become dishonest. Thus, no one must be trusted implicitly. Yet a king cannot be unduly suspicious either. He must blend trust with mistrust judicially. He should use one minister to spy on another. But of all those close to him, a king should fear his own blood like death. A kinsman always considers himself the king's equal or his superior, and he is more envious than anyone else. His own kinsmen cannot bear to see a king prosper. A wry smile twitches at the Kuru patriarch's lips. He says, but you know all about that, Yudhishthir. Yet a king needs his kinsmen more than anyone else. With them also he must behave as if he trusts them completely, but in truth he must always be watchful. Yudhishthir asks, what kind of men should be made legislators? What qualities should the ministers of war have? Which men should be a king's courtiers and which ones his counselors? The legislators should be modest, restrained men. They must be honest and sincere and have the courage of truth with them at all times. The ministers for war must be men who are close to the king, ever at his side. Most of all, they must be brave men and kshatriyas. They must be learned too, and their only fault should be their excessive love for their master. A courtier should be from the noblest lineage, and the king must always treat him with honor. He also must be one who is always loyal, a man who never abandons his sovereign, whatever the circumstances. The officers of the army must be from noble stock and born in the king's own country. Let them be handsome, learned, and powerful men. So they inspire loyalty and devotion in the soldiers. They must be of impeccable conduct and, above everything else, loyal. As counselors, a king must have four Brahmins, learned in the Vedas, all of them snataks and dignified past reproach. He must have 8 Kshatriyas, strong men and proficient warriors. He must have 21 Vaishyas, all wealthy, 3 Shudras, pure, humble, and intelligent, and 1 Sudra. Remember that these counselors must all be above 50 years of age. Among a king's main tasks is to punish those that commit crimes in his land. The wealthy criminal should have his riches or property taken from him, while the poor criminal should be imprisoned. Corporal punishment may be used to check the more hardened lawbreakers. A good king levies taxes as a bee gathers pollen from flowers, gently, without injuring his people. He is like a tigress who grips her cubs firmly in her teeth but never hurts them. Bheeshma imparts his treasure of wisdom to Yudhishthir over many days. There is much he shares that has not been recorded, for at times he speaks in secret. At dusk, the Pandavas go back to Hastinapur, and they return each morning with the sun. Once Yudhishthir asks, Pitama, tell me again how a king should conduct himself. Dharam must be his very life, but there is nothing greater than dharam in the world. Dharam makes one king better than another, and with dharam, a king can conquer the earth. Remember, his ministers must be men of dharam as well, as pure as he is, and their truth should radiate by word and by deed throughout the land. Malice has no place in a king's heart. His senses must be perfectly subdued. He must love his people as a father does his children, and he should use his intelligence without passion. Then his reign will be glorious, and his greatness swell like a sea fed by 1,000 rivers. Yudhishthir says, the way of dharam is long. It is said to have 100 branches. Which are the main duties to be followed? First of all, the mother, the father, and the guru must be worshipped. And what they command must be obeyed without question. Serving his father helps a man cross the sea of sansar. Serving his mother raises him up into Devlok. And serving the guru bestows the realm of Brahm on a Shishya. Tell me about Dharam, Arth, and Kam, Pitama. Which of them helps take one's life in the right direction? The three exist together. They are indivisible. When a man creates earth, wealth for himself, always treading the path of dharma, wealth is rooted in virtue, and calm, pleasure is the fruit of wealth. All these come to be by the effort of a man's will. In this world, there are objects created for the gratification of the senses, and the acquisition of these is the will's concern. When a man is unattached to the objects of pleasure, he is liberated. One needs virtue, punya, to protect the body. One requires wealth to be virtuous. However, dharam, earth, and calm must never be pursued just for themselves, but always as a means to knowledge, the knowledge of the self. Virtue must be required not for pleasure, but to purify the soul. Wealth must be acquired so it can be spent with perfect relinquishment, and pleasure must be pursued not to gratify the body, but only to support it. Thus, dharam, earth, and calm are founded in the will, and all three are necessary means to an end. The end is moksha, the final goal, the only one. As a man approaches moksha, he must abandon dharam, earth, and calm by tapasya, ascetic penance. This is end of the chapter, but not the end of the teachings. So we'll continue with the next chapter The title is Dharam. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaye Purnameva Visheshyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you very much for listening.